Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation called The Power of the Disability Vote, brought to you by the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire, the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire, and ABLE New Hampshire. I'm going to let the other presenters introduce themselves, and then we will quickly move into the presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody. My name is Isadora Rodriguez Legendre. I am the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Ellen Edgerly. I work as a community organizer for the Brain Injury Association of New Hampshire. I am also a family member of a daughter who sustained a brain injury.
Good afternoon. My name is James Zegra, and I'm a staff attorney at the Disability Rights Center in Concord.
Hello again. My name is Lisa Bodwin, and I'm the Executive Director of ABLE New Hampshire, and I'm also a parent. So ABLE New Hampshire's mission is to advocate for the full civil and human rights of children and adults with disabilities. We promote full participation by improving systems of supports, connecting families, inspiring communities, and influencing public policy. We use a synergistic blend of the disciplined practice of community organizing, which is people and their stories, and they make clear demands about what they would like to have changed. And that gets backed up by evidence-based best practice and research. We love to support ordinary citizens to become extraordinary leaders, and we believe in inclusion, everyone, everywhere, every day. One of our founding principles in community organizing is to have a fierce relationship with power. Power, very simply, is the ability to act. We really encourage everybody with and without disabilities to feel powerful and to have a very comfortable relationship with power, which again is just simply the ability to act. And if you aren't powerful, why not? What kind of mental blocks do you have at using your voice in the public arena? And how can your immediate community, your family, organizations like the presenting organizations today, how can we support you to feel and be powerful? And like to share with you an idea around how the disability community is powerful, right? Why vote, right? Why vote? Well, because we have values. The disability community believes in lifelong learning. We believe in national legislation like the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have values around full funding for adult services. We believe that there's a value in making sure that affordable, accessible housing gets built for people in the disability community. And we want to make sure that the Olmstead decision is held up. So it's important to vote, because when we vote, our vote reflects our values, and these things on the slide are examples of how our values get reflected in our vote. These are the things we care about. So we work together as a community because we all share in the same self-interest. We all have the same values that we need to protect when we as the disability community are voting. And it's really important that we all act on our self-interest. And that self-interest, again, is a reflection of the things we really care about. It's what keeps us awake at night, right? Our values are the things we lay awake at night wondering, how do we make sure that our values get represented in the public arena? And the way that our values get represented in the public arena is to organize. Right? There are lots of ways to organize. You can organize at your school board. You can organize around the rehabilitation of a park. But voting is a very powerful way for people impacted by disability to make their values clear in the public arena. 19% of Americans experience a disability, and some numbers say it's 23.9%. So basically 1 in 4 Americans experiences a disability, and this is 2.3 million more votes if all people with disabilities voted at the same rate as people without disabilities. And that's powerful. That's a powerful way for us to tell elected officials and other decision makers exactly what it is that the disability community values. If we vote only for elected officials who will stand beside us on legislative issues that reflect our values, well, the disability community would have far fewer problems if we made sure to hold our elected officials accountable to voting in our self-interest, reflecting our values. So think about this. We value equity, opportunity, and access for people with disabilities. And if we voted in a block for elected officials who reflected our values in the legislation that they put forward, we would change the outcome of elections. So feel powerful and be powerful. Reflect your power through the vote. And together, when we vote as a unit, elected officials will protect Medicaid, they will protect IDEA, they will fully fund services, they will fix the housing issues, they will address the employment problems that the disability community faces, and we will get full funding for oral health care, and the list goes on and on. So don't be afraid of feeling powerful, embrace power, and strategically work with others who share your values to make sure that what the disability community cares about is reflected in the officials we elect to office. Thank you. We want respect for people with disabilities.
Good afternoon. The Brain Injury Association's mission is to create a better future through brain injury prevention, education, advocacy, and support. We very much believe in the power of the vote. What we have done is we've organized a grassroots organization. It started with a group of parent advocates who were sitting around a kitchen table in 1983 of brain injury children and teens who came together to help one another to assure that needed services and supports were available to all New Hampshire citizens. Today, we remain a grassroots organization led by a dedicated team of parents, caregivers, and professionals. We have a disability legislative network where if you're not on the network, if you'd like to be, please check out my contact information. We send out a weekly Advocacy Matters newsletter with up-to-date legislative public policy information. And we also oversee a grassroots brain injury listserv that sends out public policy and legislative information. Next. Voting and advocating with public policy in the legislature can promote adequate health care for individuals. For example, this year, our grassroots network worked on a few bills, more than a few, but I'll only mention two. One was the Senate Bill 422, establishing an adult dental benefit under the state Medicaid program. And a lot of our family caregivers, family members went out, wrote letters, contacted the legislators. Another one was Senate Bill 234, which requires a student ID cards to include the National Suicide Prevention Line. The power of advocacy promotes the independence for individuals in the community. As a caregiver, your powerful vote on the behalf of the individuals that you support, you live and share their experiences and knowledge of the value of independence for individuals in the community. The same also applies for a quality of life to individuals based on their self-determined values. As a caregiver, your powerful vote on the behalf of individuals with disabilities is determined by your lived experience and knowledge. It is very powerful when we know as a group of caregivers that we are one of the largest growing voting populations on the state and national level. Caregiver voices need to be heard. In our state, the most recent record I have is we have 177,000 caregivers in New Hampshire. That is a very powerful vote. Next, powerful caregiver advocacy. On a personal note, there were times when family and professional caregivers were providing support to my daughter, Sarah, while we were testifying in Concord. It was a learning experience for them. Some of these individuals, believe it or not, have never voted in their entire life. That shocked me. And I received follow-up afterwards from a few caregivers who advised me that after going to Concord with Sarah and myself, they followed up with their individual representatives and senators and shared their experience as a caregiver. One of life navigations is to support the individual. Could be in voting, either voting at a local ward or helping the individual complete an absentee ballot. Next. This is a photo of Sarah with Governor Shaheen and Senator Caroline McCarley. We were successful in the passage of Senate Bill 182, which helped to provide case management for individuals with brain injuries. Next. And this was another time we had an opportunity to work with Governor Lynch. And this is Sarah's sister, Emily, myself, and Governor Lynch. Next. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. So my name is James Zegra. I'm an attorney at the Disability Rights Center, and we are a legal services organization based in New Hampshire. We're federally funded nonprofit or a nonpartisan organization, and we provide services to clients with disabilities. So if you feel like you're being discriminated against because of your disability, please give our office a call and we'd be happy to provide you with free legal advice. Next. So today I'm going to be talking about voting rights, and I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. I want to go over how to register to vote, your right to an accessible ballot, and your right to vote privately and independently. Next. So one thing I want to point out too is on our website, drcnh.org, we have a voting toolkit that's available for free online, and it's designed to help people with disabilities understand their right to vote and how to navigate the voting process. We tried to make it as easy to understand as possible. It explains the voting process, and it has phone numbers in there for any problems that you may encounter. And it also has information about where you can look up information on candidates and where you can get facts and figures on potential candidates. So you can do your homework before you go out and vote this November. Next. So one of the things that I want to point out at the outset is that having a disability doesn't prevent you from voting. So people with developmental disabilities are able to vote. Guardians cannot tell anybody, regardless of their disability, that they cannot vote. A court cannot take away somebody's right to vote in almost every circumstance. So just bear that in mind, that if you have a guardian and your guardian is telling you that you can't vote, or if you think that you can't vote because you have a guardian, contact our office and we'd be happy to talk with you about your rights and how to make sure that you can express yourself at the polling place. The other piece I wanted to talk about too is voters with communication disabilities. So if somebody has a disability where they're not able to talk or communicate orally, they're still able to vote. What they need to do is they need to be able to express a preference, and that can be by blinking their eyes, tapping a finger, or doing any other things that indicate that they have a preference. So as long as they can meet that threshold, they will be eligible to vote. Next. And folks with disabilities have the right to vote privately, and they have the right to vote independently. Now, voting privately means that your ballot is secret. You don't have to tell anybody else who you voted for or why you voted that way. You don't have to explain to anybody your choices. Those are your choices to make, and you can share them if you want, but nobody can force you to tell them how you voted. The other part is you have a right to vote independently. Now, I'm going to talk in a minute about different types of accommodations that people have if they want assistance at the polling place. But New Hampshire has a voting system set up where people with disabilities can vote on their own without assistance so that they can maintain the privacy and secrecy of their ballot. Next. So in order to vote, you first have to register. And if you haven't registered to vote, you can do it in one of two ways. You can do it either before the election, or you can do it at the polling place on election day. If you're going to register to vote before the election, you can go to your city or town hall and talk to the clerk and show them the proper documents that you need to register. And you have to do that 2 weeks before the election. So this year it's October 25th. The second way you can do it is registering to vote at the polling place. And what you need to do is bring the documents with you. And I'm going to tell you about the documents in just a second. But you bring those documents in, you fill out paperwork, and you are set to go, and you can vote on election day. So if you forget and you miss the October 25th deadline, it's not a big deal. You can still go to the polling place and vote. Next. So in order to register, you need to be able to prove three things. You need to be able to prove that you are over 18 years old, that you are a citizen of the United States, and that you reside in the city or town that you reside, that you live in. So it's pretty straightforward. You can use either a driver's license or a birth certificate to establish your age. If you want to use proof of citizenship, a birth certificate will work. So will a passport or any sort of naturalization papers. And then any sort of documentation that shows that you live at your current address and you reside there, that will satisfy the residency requirement as well. So those are the things that you need to bring to either the polling place or city hall for registration. If you don't have all of those documents, that's okay. You can still fill out what's called an affidavit, which is it's basically a form that you fill out and you say, I promise that I am who I say I am. I promise I'm telling the truth about that. And it's very important to be honest, because if you lie about it, you can get in a lot of trouble and there are consequences for it. It is something that you can be charged with voting fraud for. So, just make sure that you have all of the documents with you, but even if you don't, you can still fill out these affidavit forms. Next. So I'm going to talk briefly about absentee voting, and you can skip this slide, Lisa. With absentee voting, it's a way that you can vote if you're not able to make it to the polling place on election day because of your disability. And so say you're going to be on vacation, or say that your disability prevents you from going to the polling place, or say that you're a caregiver or a family member of somebody with a disability and you're caring for them and you're not able to make it to the polling place on election day. You can go to town hall beforehand, or you can fill out a form online and print it out and mail it in. And what happens is you fill out the form, you send it to your town clerk, they will mail you back a ballot, and you can fill out that ballot and send it back in. But it's really important to note that you have to request these absentee ballots. They're not going to be automatically sent to you. So if you're not going to be able to make it to the polling place on election day, make sure that you're able to make this request. You can do it up to the day before the election. Next slide, please. So if you're registered to vote already, it's super easy to do. You just contact your city or town clerk and you request the ballot. The other thing you can do is you can go to the New Hampshire Secretary of State's website. It's pretty easy to navigate. They have a form that you can print and fill out. You can't register to vote absentee online, but what you can do is you can print it out and you can send it into your city or town clerk, and a ballot will be sent to you. Next. If you're not registered to vote, that's okay too. You can register and get an absentee ballot at the same time. The easiest way to do that is to go to your local city or town hall, but you can also print out the forms online and send them in. It's a little bit trickier because if you need to register, you're going to have to show proof of citizenship, age, and residency. So I'd really recommend going to the city or town hall beforehand, requesting that you register to vote absentee, and you will get sent a ballot for that election only. Now, again, it's super important to remember that if you voted absentee in the past, you still need to request an absentee ballot for the next election. Next. So using an absentee ballot, it's really, really simple. What you need to do is you need to, you'll get the ballot in the mail, you complete the ballot, you vote for the candidates that you want, you mail it back inside of an envelope, and you can sign it, and you can either mail it back or you can drop it off at the town clerk's office. And the most important thing to remember about absentee ballots is they have to be in by 5 o'clock on election day. So if your absentee ballot isn't returned until 5:01 or 5:30 on election day, it's going to get thrown out and your vote is not going to count. So you need to make sure that you return the absentee ballot before election day. So if you're going to mail it, you need to mail it at least a week before election day to make sure that your vote is going to be counted. And if you're unable to access a paper ballot, if you have a print disability and you can't use your hands or you're unable to fill out paper because of a visual impairment, there's a process for accessible absentee voting. And if you have questions about that, you can contact the Disability Rights Center. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about how to register for an accessible absentee ballot. Next. So for people who haven't voted before, I think it's important to know what to expect when you go to vote. First thing to know is some of these elections can be pretty crowded. This is a midterm election, so it shouldn't be super crowded like it is during a presidential election, but there's still going to be a lot of people there, so you may need to wait in line. But what you do is you go up, you wait in line, you show your photo ID, and if you're already registered. If you're not, you need to register first, and then you show your photo ID. You'll be handed a ballot. You go to the voting booth, you complete it, and then you hand it in to the poll worker, and it gets counted. It's a pretty simple process. And in most precincts, you get a sticker too, which is nice. Next. In New Hampshire, it's important to also note that we do have a voter ID law. And what that means is that you're going to be asked to show a photographic ID of yourself before you vote. If you don't have a photo ID, that's okay. There are a couple different things you can do. Since there's still a little bit of time before the election, you can go to your city or town clerk's office and request a form. And every city and town clerk in the state has these forms. And basically, it's a certificate that you fill out and you bring to the DMV, and they will print out for free a voter ID. It's a photographic ID that's like a non-driver's identification, but it's for voting purposes only. So you can't use it for other things like going to the airport or, you know, going to buy adult products. Now, if you miss that deadline and you still don't have a photo ID, that's okay too. Similar to registering without the proper paperwork, what you're going to do is you're going to explain to the clerk that's registering people on election day that you don't have a photo ID, and you're going to have to fill out one of those forms and say, I promise that I am who I say I am, and the clerk will take a picture of you and staple it to that form, and they'll follow up with you after the election. So again, it's really important to make sure that you tell the truth and don't lie, because we don't want anybody to get in trouble with voter fraud. Next. So at the polling place, you can skip this slide, Lisa. Every polling place in New Hampshire is required to be physically accessible for people with disabilities. And what that means is that there's supposed to be a clear path to travel. There's supposed to be enough parking spaces that are accessible for people with mobility impairments. They should be able to navigate the polling place without barriers like stairs or things like that, or really steep slopes. So every polling place should be accessible. If it's not, you know, there are options that I'll talk about in just a minute. But once you get inside the polling place, there are accessible booths. As you can see in the picture right here, there's a big booth with a universal symbol of somebody in a wheelchair, as well as New Hampshire votes. And it's a bigger tent than most voting tents are. So you're allowed to use that, or you could use a regular tent, or they have tables set up too. If you'd rather just vote on a table, they have a screen set up so you can still vote privately. Next. So like I mentioned a minute ago, all these polling places are supposed to be physically accessible. If they're not physically accessible and you're unable to get inside, or if there's some sort of emergency that happens beforehand that causes you to not be able to make it inside the polling place, you can still vote. And what you need to do is have somebody go inside and alert the moderator that you're outside and that you need what's called a curbside ballot. And so somebody from, it'll either be the moderator, the clerk, or some other deputized election official will come out, you fill out some paperwork, and they'll hand you the absentee ballot either from your car or next to your car. You fill it out, you give it back to the poll worker, and they'll bring it inside to be counted. So even if you're unable to get inside of a polling place due to an unforeseen disability, you still have that option of curbside voting. If there's a problem with that, you can call DRC or you can call the Secretary of State's office, and they will set the local city or town clerk straight and make sure that you're able to cast your ballot on election day. Next. The other cool feature about voting in person is this accessible voting system that's in every polling place for statewide and federal elections, and it's called the One for All. And it's a tablet device with a touch screen, and it also has a set of headphones and a keyboard, and it's designed to let anybody, regardless of ability, cast their ballot. They can, if they're blind and they're unable to read the screen, the headphones will read the ballot to them, and the person can use a keyboard to hit the enter key to choose which candidate. And then after you vote for all the candidates, at the very end, it'll read you back all the choices that you made. If that's correct, you put in your ballot face down into the printer, and it will come out on the same ballot, the same piece of paper that all the other voters use, and it'll be counted the same exact way. And so in this way, people with disabilities that are blind or have visual impairments or print disabilities can still vote privately and independently, and their vote is going to count just the same as everybody else's. Next. So you are also allowed to have somebody help fill out your ballot. So if you have difficulty reading or difficulty comprehending what the offices are, or you have difficulty writing, for whatever reason, if you need somebody to help you fill out your ballot, you're allowed to have anybody you want except your employer, so your boss, or if you are in a union, your union representative. Aside from that, it can be somebody that lives in your town. It could be somebody that lives in California. It really doesn't matter. As long as they're there with you and they're willing to help, they fill out a form and that says, I promise I'm going to help this person vote the way that they want. And if you don't have anybody to help you, but you still want help, that's fine too. You can just ask a poll worker, and one of the poll workers will help you fill out your ballot. Next. So if you encounter any sort of problems leading up to election day, like problems registering to vote, or on election day, if the voting place is not accessible, or if you try to use the accessible voting machine and something goes wrong, or the poll workers don't know how to use it, there are options. So what you can do is you can call the New Hampshire Secretary of State. They have a voter assistance hotline set up especially on election day, or you could also call the Disability Rights Center. We also have a hotline going, and you'll be able to talk to an attorney who's around all day, and that's their job, is to help voters who are encountering barriers to voting on election day. So if you feel like something's wrong or something just isn't right, make sure that you contact the Secretary of State or DRC, and we can contact the Secretary of State's office on your behalf if you don't feel comfortable doing that on your own. Next. So I've talked a lot about the Secretary of State. They're the state entity that manages elections for statewide elections, and their website has a lot of really helpful information on it. They have information about how to register, what kind of documents you can use. They have information about what kinds of photo IDs are acceptable. They also have some pretty neat tools on there too, where you can enter in, your address, and it'll tell you exactly where you're going to vote, where your polling place is located if you aren't sure. And then if you have requested an absentee ballot, that's all recorded online. So your ballot's going to be private, but what'll happen is you can track your absentee ballot kind of like, tracking in the mail. So it will alert you that, yes, your ballot has been received by the clerk, or no, your ballot has not been received by the town clerk. If you fill it out and you mail it back and it hasn't gotten back to the clerk, if you check on election day and it still hasn't gotten back, you probably should try to get to the polling place in person and explain the situation, and you should be able to cast the ballot instead of the absentee ballot. Next. So the last thing I really want to stress is to make sure that you have a plan to vote coming up on election day. It's coming up in just a couple of weeks, and it's important to research the candidates. We're a nonpartisan organization, but there are a lot of nonpartisan organizations out there that will give information about all the candidates and where they stand on issues. And so it's worthwhile to do your homework. It doesn't take a long time. Our toolkit has a lot of different resources for that, but one of the ones that I really like is called vote411.org or ballotpedia.org. And both of those organizations have just neutral information about all the candidates, where they stand in their races. And the other caution I'll give, if you don't use a website like that, is just be aware that sometimes the ads that you see on television or on YouTube or things that pop up on somebody's Facebook feeds, they're not always entirely truthful. So make sure that you get your sources from, your news from multiple different sources, and make sure you do your own research. If you're voting absentee, you need to request an absentee ballot as soon as possible, especially if you're going to be mailing it in. The mail is a little bit slower than it used to be. So if you want to make sure that your vote gets there on time, you can request your ballot as soon as possible and deliver it back in time to be counted. And if you're voting in person, make sure that you know how you're going to get to the polling place. Make sure you know where you're going to vote, and just line that up and try to organize it as best you can ahead of time. Because the last thing you want to do is to realize, oh, geez, it's 4 o'clock on election day and I don't know how to get to a polling place. I don't have transportation. So there's still time left to get transportation and organize it. I know the city of Nashua runs free buses, and you can go back. If you have your voting, like I voted sticker, they'll give you a free ride back to wherever you came from or wherever you need to go. Next.
Hi, so again, for everybody, my name is Isadora Rodriguez Legendre, and I work at the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. I want to share a little bit about our organization and then how we can support you in voting on Election Day. Next slide. So at the DD Council, we are dedicated to dignity, full rights of citizenship, cultural diversity, equal opportunities, and full participation for all New Hampshire citizens with developmental disabilities. So a big part of what we do is ensure that people with disabilities have quality of life and that they have the tools that they need to get involved in civic engagement and advocacy. Next slide, please. There's a lot of information on this slide. I just want to highlight some points for you all about DD councils. DD councils were created by a federal law that's known as the DD Act. And our council must be comprised of at least 60% members with intellectual or developmental disabilities and or parents or guardians of people who cannot advocate for themselves. And this ensures that our work and our projects and our policy work, everything that we do is led by the people who are most impacted by our projects. And so what we do is we support public policies and initiatives that promote opportunities for all New Hampshire citizens in every area of life so that they can be fully engaged in their communities. And then we also help remove barriers for people. So that's part of how we help people get to vote too. It's try and address the barriers that people might have in accessing polls on election day. So we identify the needs of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities through a state plan, and we have objectives and activities related to self-advocacy, community engagement, quality of services, and a lot of what we do is really we partner with other organizations to provide education and advocacy. We also fund innovative projects that help create opportunities and reduce barriers. So some of our partner organizations are here today, like ABLE New Hampshire, the Disability Rights Center, and the Brain Injury Association. And together we work as a team to really impact systemic change. So there are DD councils in every state and territory, which enables us to really focus on the needs of New Hampshire and put those first. Next slide, please. So Some of the voter resources that I just want to talk about really quickly are that your values matter. We heard from Able New Hampshire talk about the power that you have to bring your values to your selections of legislators on election day. So voting for your representatives is how you can communicate the values that are important to you. As James said, it's important to do a little bit of homework and learn about what people stand for so that you know that you're voting for someone who really stands for your values. If you don't feel safe or comfortable voting in person, please use absentee ballots. The DD Council can be a resource for people that need assistance and information about voting. You heard from the caregiver from the Brain Injury Association about the importance of caregivers supporting people with disabilities to ensure that they can exercise their civic duties in voting. And we want to connect you with other organizations, some of whom aren't here today, that can help assist you with registering to vote, filling out absentee ballots, or getting to the voting booth. So Able New Hampshire in the past has provided gift cards for people who need a little bit of support to get financial assistance for transportation, if that's necessary. And if you have questions, you should definitely reach out to any one of our organizations, and we'd be happy to connect you with whomever we think has the best answer for you, whether it's about transportation or absentee ballots, or as James shared, there are several websites that can help you understand what different legislators stand for. We'd be happy to connect you with those as well. Next slide, please. So if you have any questions, again, about any of the information that was presented here today, you can reach out to any one of us. Our contact information is on this slide. It's important to know that the Disability Rights Center, Able New Hampshire, the DD Council, and the Brain Injury Association are really here to help you exercise your right to vote. So we're happy to have been able to provide this important presentation to you today. I want to thank you for joining us, and we hope that it was informative and that it helps you get out and vote. Thank you.